right here from the town of Gilbert, our fantastic citizens did this last Saturday on the 20th. There were 15 projects for volunteers to come out and help with. And we estimate we got somewhere around 500 to 600 volunteers out, which we felt was fantastic, being the end of a vacation period, and it was really wonderful. I'm not going to spend all the time going through every project. That's too many, but I wanted to highlight a few things just to give you an idea of what was done. We had some town projects for the town of Gilbert that were done. At Cosmo Dog Park, for example, our volunteers used 8 tons of dirt to fill in ruts in some of the areas, and it enabled us to reopen our overflow parking. They also painted this is at Freestone Park now, like a quarter mile of wall. And in fact, we ran out of paint was the major issue there in not being able to continue. So that's wonderful work they did. Also at House of Refuge, a transitional shelter, they painted 8 houses. About 100 volunteers came out, painted 8 houses with 80 gallons of paint. Did a wonderful job there. And just the last one I wanted to touch on was the cards and placemats for seniors and veterans. About 150 or so volunteers came out. They put together 410 cards for our elderly and disabled, and they also did 300 placemats. And they wrote 84 letters to our military service men and women. And so I wanted to mention them because on that note, whereas the town of Gilbert is a community, I need to explain this. Our wonderful mayor of Gilbert, I brought him up here because he helped us rally these volunteers, get them together. And in fact, on the day of, he brought himself and his family out, and he went from place to place thanking the volunteers, and we're just so grateful for his leadership. And so I really want to present this to him, but let me read it here. Whereas the town of Gilbert is a community which acknowledges that a special vibrancy exists within the entire community when when its individual citizens collectively go the extra mile in personal effort, volunteerism, and service. And whereas the town of Gilbert is a community which encourages its citizens to maximize their personal contribution to the community by giving of themselves wholeheartedly and with total effort, commitment, and conviction to their individual ambitions, family, friends, and community. And whereas the town of Gilbert is a community which chooses to shine a light on and celebrate individuals and organizations within the community who go the extra mile in order to make a difference and lift up fellow members of their community. And whereas the town of Gilbert acknowledges the mission of the Extra Mile America Foundation to create 250 extra mile cities and states in America, and is proud to support Extra Mile Day on November 1st, 2012. Now, therefore, on behalf of the mayor of the town of Gilbert, I do hereby proclaim November 1st, 2012 to be Extra Mile Day in Gilbert, Arizona, and I urge each individual in the community to take time on this day to not only go the extra mile in his or her own life, but to also acknowledge all those who are around who are inspirational in their efforts and commitment to make their organizations, families, community, country, or world a better place. On that note, let's give our mayor and our wonderful volunteers a big hand.
Mayor? Cheers. I accept humbly.
Thank you.
October. Fall is in the air. It's a wonderful time of year. And we all pause to reflect on the importance of our cities and towns here and the opportunity we have to live in great communities like the town of Gilbert. And we are pleased to recognize with the Arizona League of Cities and Towns, as well as other municipalities around the state, that October 22nd through October 26th is Arizona Cities and Towns Week. I know most of you have already been celebrating it all week, and we appreciate that. continue to celebrate by shopping Gilbert. That's probably the best way you can do it. But local governments are extremely important in the state of Arizona. Most people obviously choose to live within a city or a town, and the service, and that's for the services and the sense of community that we all receive and enjoy in cities and towns. And so today we have as a special guest Ken Strobeck from the Arizona League of Cities and Towns, and we've asked him to receive this proclamation, which we'll provide to him in just a minute. But before I give this to him, I'd like him to just spend a few minutes telling us about cities and towns in Arizona as well as the League. So I'll turn the microphone over to you, Ken.
And thank you very much, Councilman Cooper, Mayor Lewis, and other members of the council. The League of Arizona Cities and Towns is celebrating its 75th anniversary this year, organized 75 years ago by mayors in the state to carry the message about what cities and towns do to the state legislature and advocate for shared revenue and for local decision making, for decisions to be made in the hometowns of cities and towns across the state. As you mentioned, Councilman, more than 80% of the citizens of Arizona live within an incorporated city or town, and there are 91 cities and towns in the state, and over 90% of the sales tax and income tax generated to the state comes from economic activity in cities and towns. So we think that's very important. And we also want to recognize the employees of cities and towns and the services that people take for granted every day, the water, the streets, the parks, all the wonderful services that are provided by cities and towns. And we also have some survey results that show that citizens trust cities and towns more than 2 to 1 over any other level of government to spend their tax dollars wisely. And we think that's a real tribute to the leaders in cities and towns, and we thank you for this proclamation.
Thank you. Oh, we'll do a picture? Okay.
Jim, would you come up, please? Jim Likens. Jim Likens is serving this year as the chairman of our Veterans Day Committee. And at this point, I'd like Jim to talk a little bit about our Veterans Day on November 8th and some of the things that we're going to have.
Thank you, Councilman Sense. My name is Jim Likens, and I'm fortunate enough to serve as the chairman of our Gilbert Veterans Day ceremony this year. As John mentioned, it's on November the 8th at 11:30, and we invite all of you to attend. We anticipate at least 350 people this year, and we'll have a free lunch for everyone at the end of the ceremony. We always try to incorporate a lot of youth into our program, and we've got the Mesquite Choir, the Gilbert High School band is going to be here. We've got, we also have had tried to get a new logo for our organization, and a Higley High School student named Daniel Woolwine submitted a logo that we loved. We had me make a few revisions, and we have officially adopted that as the Gilbert Veterans Day Committee new logo. And Daniel will be a part of our ceremony on November the 8th. He's very excited. And if you'd go to our website, www.gilbertveteransday.com, you can see all the information about the event. But we strongly encourage you to remember our veterans and to celebrate Veterans Day with us on Thursday, November the 8th. Thank you. Thank you, John. Okay. All right.
I'm now going to read a proclamation from the Office of the Mayor, Town of Gilbert. Whereas Veterans Day, November 11th, is set aside annually for celebrating our military veterans and was begun as the commemoration of the end of hostilities of World War I, which went into effect on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And whereas November 11th marks a day to honor America's veterans for their patriotism, love of country, and willingness to serve and sacrifice for the common good. And whereas, like the heroes before them, today a new generation of men and women are fighting for freedom around the globe. And whereas, in honoring our veterans, we also wish to remember those who made the ultimate sacrifice, laying down their lives that we may live in freedom. And whereas, as we honor our veterans in ceremonies this day, let our actions strengthen the bond between a nation and her warriors. And whereas, on this Veterans Day, we pay tribute to the service and sacrifice of the men and women who bravely worn the uniform of the United States military. Every soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and Coast Guardman has earned the lasting gratitude of the American people. Now, therefore, I, John W. Lewis, Mayor of the town of Gilbert, Arizona, does hereby proclaim the week of November 5th, 2012, as Veterans Week in Gilbert. And he encourages Gilbert citizens to recognize the valor and sacrifice of our veterans and thank them for their service to our country. He invites the civic and fraternal organizations, places of worship, schools, businesses, and the media to support this national observance with commemorative expressions and programs. Up.
Okay.
Mayor?
Before I come down, I was testing the mic and it's working, so council members, please resume position on the dais and we'll see if the mic's working. Before we move to communication from citizens, the end of the agenda talks about current events, and I'll just mention three things quickly. First, this Saturday, from noon to 9 p.m., the community, families, individuals are invited to Freestone Park for the annual Fall Music and Halloween Festival. It's a great event. You can wear your Halloween costumes, and we invite you to participate in that activity. Also, today there were two events that I make note of. There was a groundbreaking ceremony that took place for a building that will start construction that is just outside of Town Hall, a little bit to the northeast, and it will be a banner clinic, a healthcare clinic. And it will be a great asset for our community. And as of today, you'll see a sign that was unveiled that has noted that the construction has started. It will be a 21,000 square foot facility scheduled to open May 22nd of next year. We also had this morning at the Higley Center for Performing Arts the Mayor's Breakfast with the Arts. And Mark, why don't you put up the sheet? This is just, there were 10 awards given. And the awards are listed on the left side, and then on the right side are the recipients. I won't take time to read them, but for public information purposes, they will be noted in the paper. And to all in our community who help contribute to the arts, we thank you for that. And you can see that we had some wonderful recipients. One just happens to be here in council chambers tonight and will be speaking to us in a few minutes, Les Presmick. Other individuals some of you will know because of their contributions that they have made in the community. Thank you. Thanks, Mark. Next on the agenda, we move to communication from citizens. The agenda notes that members of the public may comment on matters within the jurisdiction of the town, but not on the agenda. The council's response is limited to responding to criticism, asking staff to review a matter commented upon, or asking that a matter be put on a future agenda. Vice Mayor Sens, what request do we have?
We have one, Mayor, and that is from Les Presmick.
Les, as you know, if you can state your name if you're a Gilbert resident, and you will be given 3 minutes.
Well, I don't know. Which one is it? Must be this one. I hope. Yep, that's it. Where's? Which one? Yeah? Okay.
Mayor Lewis, Gilbert Town Council members, my name is Les Presmick. I am a resident of the town of Gilbert, and I'm just here this evening to speak to remind folks of a couple of upcoming events. Jim Likens already did a fine job talking about the Gilbert Town Veterans Day coming up on November 8th, but I also want to remind folks that the Higley Unified School District has their Veterans Day ceremony on November 9th from 9 to 10:30 at Higley High School, and you see the address there. The second thing that the town does that I want to talk about for a few seconds is Operation Welcome Home. I believe we've had 6 ceremonies honoring those of our servicemen and women who have served overseas, and when they return and are nominated and come before us, we honor not just the serviceman or woman, but their families. And for those of you who have been there, you know how moving a ceremony it is. And right now, we have all the small business support we need. What we need are nominations. We've had to postpone one ceremony for lack of nominations. What we're running into is that in much the same way that they serve our country so humbly and so nobly, they do not want to be singled out for this kind of recognition. But we feel very strongly that this is just one thing that the town of Gilbert can do for our returning servicemen and women. So if you know of someone who has served overseas, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan, and have returned within the last 2 years, we would like you to go to this, the town website that I have up here, or gilbertsba.com, and you can get information on Welcome Home, or Operation Welcome Home. You can get the nomination forms. You can contact me if you can spell Presmick. You can find me in the phone book. Councilmember Jen Daniels is the other one to contact. So please, we would like nominations. We would like to have our next ceremony November 15th. All right. And one last thing. On November 3rd, we have one of 2 fundraising gala events at the Higley Center for the Performing Arts. It's the Arts Affair. This will be our 3rd. It is a dinner and evening of entertainment. I would like to both invite and challenge town staff and the council to attend this event. We have the amazing Kreskin coming tonight. And one of the things he has to do is find his paycheck within the audience. If he doesn't find it, if he doesn't prove to us that he is the amazing Kreskin, he doesn't get paid. Now that's incentive. It starts at 5:30 on Saturday, November 3rd. We will have a silent auction. We will have dinner and drinks, and then the amazing Kreskin as our entertainment. This year, for the first time, we are offering folks the opportunity. You can either pay a little bit more for a very nice dinner presented by our presenting sponsor, Carrabba's Italian Grill, or you can come a little bit later, pay a few dollars extra or less, and just attend the entertainment starting at 7:30. Of course, we'd like to see you for dinner, especially you and your spouses. But if you can only come for the entertainment, we'd welcome you as well. And so there is the website to go to for all the information, higleyarts.org/shows/public. I hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thank you, Les. Next on the agenda is the consent calendar. Items listed on the consent calendar may be approved by a single motion unless removed at the request of council for further discussion or action. Other items on the agenda may be added to the consent calendar and approved under single motion. Vice Mayor Sens, what request do we have?
We have no request to speak, Mayor. I move that we accept the consent calendar, items 7 through 22, plus item 32, and then item 33. I would like to nominate Marcy Norton for the Police and Public Safety Retirement System Local Pension Board with a term ending December 12, 2012. Excuse me, beginning December 1st, 2012, and ending November 30th, 2016.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please vote. That's approved with a 7-0 vote. Thank you. We move to the public hearing. As noted on the agenda, public hearing items 23 and Council Vice Mayor Sens, 23 I note that is to be continued to November 15th. For legal counsel, could we go ahead and accept that motion now? I don't need to open or close that hearing.
You can just include that as your motion to accept, except that that one will be continued until the 23rd.
Okay.
Or whenever it was.
I will entertain a motion on that.
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Please vote. That is approved. So for the public hearing, agenda items 24 through 31 will be heard at one public hearing, at which time anyone wishing to comment on a public hearing item may do so. Comments will be heard from those in support of or in opposition to an item. In order to comment on a public hearing item, you needed to fill out a public comment form. And Vice Mayor Sens, do we have some requests?
We have one request, Mayor, for item 30.
Okay. Let me just check here in council chambers. Were there any other citizens that wish to speak in the public hearing? Okay, thank you. We will proceed then, and I will. So that was 30 council members. I know that from our discussion, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, there may need to be a few items from our town staff. And so I would entertain a motion to approve agenda items 24 through 26. So 24, 25, 26. But, excuse me, let me open the public hearing for 24, 25, 26. Ask the council if there was any discussion that you wanted to have on those three items. And I will close the public hearing on 24, 25, 26 and entertain a motion.
Move to approve, Mayor.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please vote. Thank you. That's approved with a 7-0 vote. I now open the public hearing for agenda item number 27 and would ask town staff to come forward and please give us a quick overview.
Mayor Lewis and Town Council, Al Ward with the Town Planning Department. Item 27 is a request for a minor general plan amendment and rezoning for Central Christian Church. It's located at the southeast corner of Germain and Lindsay Road, and the request is to modify the zoning on approximately 99.3 acres, amend the general plan on approximately 41.1 acres, and it will accommodate a new residential subdivision, at least on the first phase, known as Copper Leaf. With that, I'd be pleased to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion from council? Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, I just wanted to ask a question. I think I know the answer to, but for the benefit of everyone else as well. With this change, is there any increase in the total number of units allowed?
Mayor Lewis and Council Member Peterson, no, there is not an increase in the total number of units being allowed on the property. The total number of units being looked at with the zoning and the general plan amendment is 286, and that was the same number that would have been provided for under the previous general plan amendment.
And so I raised that question because, being on AMWA, I'm very conscious of the issue of our water resources. Anytime we're increasing density, I want to kind of talk about where the water's going to come for that, but that won't be an issue with this change, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other discussion or questions? Before I close the public hearing, I'll just double check. And it looks like council's ready for that. So I close the public hearing on agenda item 27 and entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve item 27.
Second.
With that motion second, please vote. Thank you. That's approved with a 7-0 vote. Agenda item number 28. Did we need to have some council discussion on 28? Just a brief one. Edgar, please.
Mayor Lewis, council members, Edgar Medina, Assistant Town Engineer over capital projects. Item number 28 is related to a property acquisition related to the Higley-Williamsville project. It is a negotiation settlement for a property that we are currently in the condemnation process. We had originally appraised the property at just over $14,500. We condemned the property, and we then again opened negotiations during the condemnation, and are at the point where staff is recommending an administrative settlement of $3,500 on top of the $14,500, bringing it to a total of $18,000.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, I just wanted to point out, although it's pretty well spelled out in the packet, that yes, we have an appraisal, and yes, we are looking at paying a little bit more than what it appraised for, but it's important to note that this will actually save the taxpayers over $11,000 settling this way. So with that, I think it's a good motion.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I close the public hearing on agenda item 28 and entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
With that motion second, please vote. Thank you. That's approved with a 7-0 vote. Agenda item number 29. I open the public hearing on 29. And Jessica, if you could please give us an overview.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Jessica Fierro, and I'm the Community Development Supervisor for the town. Item number 29 is in regards to the annual funding appropriations that council approves utilizing general funds to contract with nonprofits to provide services within the town. There's also a second item on the same council packet asking for direction and approval of the membership of the Community Services Committee so that we can begin our fiscal year 13-14 annual appropriation process.
Thank you. Discussion from the council. Councilmember Peterson, followed by Vice Mayor Sens.
Mayor, this is something I touched on last year. I know there wasn't a lot of time to discuss it, but I just want to kind of bring it up again and see if we can add anything here related to the measurable outcomes. I wanted to share very briefly, I won't share much of it, but there was an article in the, believe it or not, the Globe and Mail, which is a Canadian newspaper. But, so they're not known for their being right-wing radicals up there, but it's a study about the effects and outcomes of the social programs in the United States. And I'll just quote here, but let me give credit. Margaret Winty wrote the article. But according to the Cato Institute, the U.S. spends nearly $1 trillion a year on anti-poverty measures, which works out to about $20,000 per poor person, or around $61,000 for a family of 3. But the other statement that's made here is, what difference has that money made? Nobody has a clue. Nobody tracked the programs or measured the outcomes or even collected local data on changing crime and dropout rates. City officials admit that because of the basic lack of information, it's impossible to evaluate the impact of these investments. Mayor, this goes back to kind of two issues. One is removing barriers to self-reliance, but also monitoring the success of these programs, which of course I think would be measured as far as how sustainably people are helped. And so I spent quite a bit of time with Jessica trying to come up with some language, and I think it could be a criterion that would be added to the evaluation sheet that is used as each of these proposals comes in. But the language that she offered, and we can certainly change it, it's really about the gist of it that matters, but I'd like to add the criterion that we prioritize programs that provide the highest measurable outcome that demonstrates the client's success in achieving self-sufficiency or removing their barriers to success after the completion of the funded program. So that's the language that Jessica felt was workable, and so I look to the rest of the council.
Thank you. Vice President, before your comments, any comments on what Councilmember Peterson just shared? Councilmember Daniels.
I just have a quick question about what the outcome of that would look like. Would we require it prior to their applying for the next year's fiscal cycle, or would we? The reason I state it in this way, and I don't disagree, I think we need to be measuring and understanding what's being provided with the dollars that are being spent. But we would perhaps run into an inconsistency of data if we didn't have a form or some type of outline of how we would want them to report that information, meaning it would be very difficult to compare organizations and rank them or prioritize them if they aren't providing us with apples to apples comparisons of each other. And that's my fear if we don't be a little bit more specific about what you mean by measurable.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson.
Mayor, I don't know that I can totally answer to the satisfaction of Councilmember Daniels on that. That's a good question. I think the idea here is that this language would be on the evaluation sheet, and those evaluation sheets are sent out as a part of the process to these when we advertise. And so they know that this, whatever it means to them, it's going to be the same language that's applied to them as every other applicant. And so do we need to define it more? Perhaps, but I don't know. I mean, I look to Jessica for her help on that, and if she has any thoughts, I welcome that.
Mayor, Councilmember Peterson and Daniels, we would provide that language on the evaluation sheet, which would go out with the proposal package, so those applying for funds would know that in advance. Usually, the nonprofits that apply do have measurable outcomes, but they are very different depending on the types of services that they provide. So, for example, an organization that provides crisis services or immediate services, their measurable outcome is going to be that they resolved that immediate crisis. Whereas a homeless provider or a transitional housing provider will have a different measurable outcome after the client has finished through those services. So we would have to take a look at that and rank them accordingly depending on the type of program that they have.
What I was hearing is that you are comfortable with that language and feel like you could find measurements that work for each of the groups and don't put them in an awkward spot. Is that a fair assessment?
That's correct, Mayor.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Councilmember Cooper.
Well, and I certainly don't dispute the need for that, and just as a point of process, I sure would love to see text like this ahead of time, and maybe it just was written up because, I mean, it's helpful to see it, and maybe we do have it, and I just missed it in my email. So could you read it again? Because I want to make sure I understand what you said.
Sure. And Mayor, I don't know if it becomes a bind for time, maybe we couldn't continue, but I'm okay if we continue it to the next meeting so people have time to review it. But here's what it says. Prioritize programs that provide the highest measurable outcome that demonstrates client success in achieving self-sufficiency, or removing their barriers to success after the completion of the funded program. It's kind of long, but the longer it is, the more specific you get, so that's kind of the idea.
Councilmember Cooper, is that?
Well, I like the principle. I'm just trying to decide whether to prioritize, especially when we've got so many different groups applying for different things. We've got these funding priorities as far as categories are concerned, and so is this within the categories? And if only one is applying within a category, I guess, I mean, I understand where you're going, and I'm more of the encourage the applicants to provide evidence of this in the past is kind of where I'm at, as opposed to necessarily prioritizing, because I'm not sure it's apples to apples.
And Jessica, you might be able to help because you've had more time to consider that language. Do you have some additional feelings that would help the council, knowing that you are into the details and would have a feel of how easy it would be to apply?
Mayor, what I would most likely do is look at programs that are similar in nature and look and see what their success rate of their clients were throughout their, once they finished their programming. So, for example, we currently fund 4 to 5 homeless shelters, and they all provide a different services to those clients. So what I would expect a response to this question in the application would be how many of Gilbert residents that they served were successful in completing the program, and out of those, which one showed the highest amount of success. So for me, I would prioritize the organization out of those 4 or 5 that had the higher success rate, therefore giving them higher points.
Councilmember Daniels?
I understand where you're going with that, and I appreciate it, Jessica. My concern is that one of the homeless shelters that we provide funds for is particularly for women and children, and others are for men, because they separate the men and women in a homeless shelter. What if the women's shelter is ranked 5th out of the 5 that we provide to, and so therefore gets no funds, and we're only funding 4 men's shelters? So I get what we're saying. I like where we're going with it. I think we need to work out the details. I don't disagree perhaps with the statement, Victor, but I also don't, Councilmember Peterson, but I also don't think I understand every word within that sentence or sentence and a half. And so I would rather not see us continue this, because we ran into a time crunch last year. I'd like the Community Services Subcommittee to get going. I'd like Jessica to have the opportunity to do that. But perhaps we can refine that statement a little bit further between now and when the Community Services Group gets working.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson. And then, after this comment, I'm going to go back to Vice Mayor Sens, who's been waiting patiently. So
would it be to include some guidance to provide refined language along those lines?
Yeah.
The motion would include, okay, I'm happy with that. That's fine.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Sens?
Well, in looking at the priorities, I see one thing that's missing, and that's my generation. What are we doing for the seniors? We've got senior center, we've got programs, we have congregate meals, and so on. Why are we not? They're not even in the top 5. So what are we doing there?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Sens, the priorities that you see before you are the adopted priorities from last year, and these are based on services, not on population. So seniors would be included in any of these services. Senior housing would be priority 1. Senior food and clothing would be priority 2. We don't define it by population, we define it by service.
I just want to make sure my group's taken care of.
Yes, sir.
Councilmember Cook?
Mayor and Council, one of the things that I was hoping from this particular agenda item was that we were waiting for the results of the need assessment, because that was one of the things that I wanted to see as part of the agenda. And I'd love for Jessica to share with us kind of what happened to that needs assessment, because I'm not sure yet that this may reflect the real needs of the town of Gilbert. And I'll give a reason why. I just learned recently that there are a large number of children who are now part of the CPS program. And I read something where maybe per capita, Gilbert may be one of the higher ones on that list and so forth. So when I think about needs assessment in Gilbert and trying to get a good, diverse survey of our population, I'm not sure yet if this is accurate.
Thank you. Jessica, the subcommittee met on Tuesday and we received feedback on the needs assessment. Do you want to give a quick overview of what we learned, and then the three of us might be able to add some comments to that too, please?
Mayor, Councilmember Cook, the Gilbert CAN organization was the organization that took on a needs assessment back in January of this year on a volunteer basis, and they provided surveys both online and in paper and received about 300 responses. They had a ASU PhD student analyze the data for them, and he made a presentation to the council subcommittee on nonprofit support on Tuesday. The results of that were that the results of the needs assessment were biased and cannot be generalized to the overall Gilbert population. There were a number of issues with the survey tool. There were issues with the respondents. They were a convenience response, not a random response. And so his recommendation was that this data was simply just opinions of a select population, and that we could not and should not use that to determine needs in any way. So that data was not included in the item before you.
I think the term that he used was it was a convenience survey where individuals were allowed to give their opinions, and we solicited their opinions, but it wasn't a random survey. The other point that was made was it was more a perception of needs as opposed to the actual needs, and therefore he was very strong in his statement of, this is good information, you can learn from it, but he was not recommending that we use it to prioritize this agenda item. There are some additional steps he was going to do, and when those are completed, the whole council will receive it. And the three of us talked about possibly sharing that, the needs assessment immediately, and we thought, well, we'll let him finish the next couple of steps and then come back to the whole council. So that's the summary of the needs assessment.
So does the subcommittee feel that the priorities actually make up the needs in Gilbert then?
We did not have that as an agenda item, so we did not discuss it, but we can now. I have a question which ties into that a little bit, and for our citizens who don't have this in front of them, there are 5 priorities that are listed with Vice Mayor Sense's comment about the seniors. This was listed, but I'll just read them again. Housing, food and clothing was the second, utility assistance third, transportation fourth, and youth services fifth. The question that I wanted to ask, and then I'll be happy to have Councilmember Ray and Councilmember Peterson share some thoughts. When we did this last year, and so this is the same list as last year, and the group that did their best to prioritize, was there a weighted average of the 5? Or were they just listed in that order? In other words, was housing 50% and food, clothing 30%, utility assistance 10%, the other 2 5%, or was it just a general statement of the 5 priorities?
Mayor, the Community Services Committee from last year looked at various reports and data to come up with these priorities, and it does not reflect an accurate need of Gilbert because an appropriate needs assessment hasn't been done since 2003. So the data sources that they used to determine these were actually requests for services from Gilbert residents, in addition to the funded nonprofits that we had that previous year, they reported the number of people that they served and the number of Gilbert residents that they turned away. And so that's how these priorities were determined, and they are weighted. So housing was a higher priority than say, youth services, but there isn't a percentage or a scientific.
When they were weighted, and you may not remember the specific percentages, but were they close to 20% apiece, or was housing quite a bit higher?
I would say, Mayor, that out of these top 5, they were within a couple of percentage points.
Okay. The point I wanted to make, and then I'll receive some more feedback, was it seemed like one struggle for the group last year was 1 through 4 were immediate needs, and the 5th one, the youth services, in some cases could be perceived as not immediate but more long-term. And I found in the discussions a year ago that I didn't want the youth services to all of a sudden just fall off because they weren't immediate, because in so many ways, if we can address some of our challenges for the youth now, it will make it so that the priorities that we have on this list 1 through 4 in future years will be either lower or non-existent for those individuals. But it's a challenge because 1 through 4 are needed now, but I was concerned last year with some of the dialogue that was almost saying we'll give the youth services 0. So that's why the weighted averages was a question for me, and you've answered it. Now back to Councilmember Cook. So the subcommittee, we did not talk about it, and it's really open to all 7 of us, but to Councilmember Peterson, Councilmember Ray, who are on the subcommittee, do you have any comments you want to make to Councilmember Cook?
I'd like to make one.
Vice Mayor Sensen.
Well, I agree with Councilmember Cook that it would be nice to have a needs assessment, and apparently we tried, pardon my French, but we tried to do it on the cheap, and it didn't work. And so what I'm recommending, or we ought to look at, is how do we get a professional needs assessment done, and what would it cost? If that's something that we think is necessary, and I think it is necessary, so we can hit the right target and not go out with a touchy-feely type thing.
We do have an answer for that, but it wouldn't be an answer that we could do immediately. No, but for the future, we talked about that, and we do have a plan in place.
Mayor, I know when we had brought this up probably a couple months ago as one of the agenda items to kind of talk about this, and I remember from the dais was we would do a needs assessment that would accurately indicate what are the needs in the town of Gilbert. And with Vice Mayor Sens, I agree. I think we should continue this so that we could actually fully assess this. Because what I'm thinking about and what I envision is that after the needs assessment is actually accurately identified, that staff could help identify those organizations that come in as through the evaluation forms or requests for applications, that we go through a process where we identify these organizations for long-term sustainability. As we ramp down on the dollars, these organizations will find a way to sustain themselves through fundraising or other funding sources. So I want to make sure that we, through this 5-year window, that we can identify these very strong organizations that can help us go past, year 6, year 7, and so forth.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
I hear what you're saying, and I appreciate it, and I agree that I'd like to have better data. There's no doubt about it. But what I also think I heard was that it wouldn't be available immediately, even if we were to go forward with some sort of a professional approach. To a point that's already been raised, we're trying to get this process started on time, and maybe even ahead of time, if you will. So if those timelines aren't really matching up, I think if you look at these priorities, you kind of feel like, intuitively, we're in the ballpark, and there aren't a lot of other needs out there. And so while the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 number might change, these are general categories that are important needs within Gilbert. And So we'll look to staff as far as the timetable is concerned, but the fact that they're bringing this forward for recommendation for movement at this time makes me feel like we kind of need to go with what we've had in place until more information is provided to us. And so I agree, I want more data, but at the same time, I don't know that I want to hold up the process, because I think we're in the neighborhood. The only other comment I would make is I would just restate a comment that I made last year as part of the drawdown. The reason that the drawdown was set up the way it was to give organizations time to make that transition that Councilmember Cook talked about. And so there are some organizations that, until they tell us otherwise, and they may feel otherwise, I think for planning purposes, they need to, we need to continue what is kind of an informal commitment to them and regardless of exactly where they fall on this priority scale.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper, there's two parts to this agenda that town staff is looking for direction. The second part is organizing the Community Services Committee, and the ABC options that were listed, with C being the recommendation from the town staff. Did you have an opinion on that you wanted to express?
The only opinion I'd express is what the staff has presented here makes sense to me as a change and transition.
So I'm interested in feedback on council on that too, and then Councilmember Cook.
I would like to actually propose an option D, and that option is not to reinstate the committee, and to actually allow staff the opportunity to actually do all the research, gather all of the processes. And I was talking to Jessica about that it actually could be a more efficient process by allowing staff to do this. And I think with the last 2 years of having the committee in the process, I know there's been struggles. And I think from an efficiency perspective, I think we should look at option D as a viable option of actually allowing staff to effectively manage this.
Thank you. Comments on that? Vice Mayor Sens?
I guess my only concern is, does the staff have the bandwidth? I don't disagree that it's probably going to be more efficient, but I don't know what else is on Jessica's plate.
Well, I was thinking, the staff has to attend the meetings. Instead of having the attending of those meetings, that staff can actually use that same time for themselves to manage.
Jessica, do you want to answer that, please?
Mayor, Vice Mayor Sens, and Council, I'm happy to do whatever process Council desires. I have the time to do option D if you'd like. I have the time to do option C as we recommended, so I'm open.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I'm okay with that idea. My only concern with that is, and I talked to Jessica about this option, and based on our conversation, the outcome recommendations, funding recommendations, if we do option D and we provide no other kind of direction, will be basically identical to last year, with everybody drawn down just a little bit. I mean, that's fine, and maybe that's okay. But if we're looking for a little bit different outcome this year than last year, I don't know that we are, but if we are, then we need some citizen input to maybe inform that process. But so that's my thought on D.
Councilmember Daniels?
I like the idea for a couple different reasons, but there's one real concern that I have about the option, and that is both the transparency and the opportunity for community input. When we have the Community Services Subcommittee, those meetings are all open to the public, and the discussion is made public. There are minutes, there are opportunities for input. If we decide to go that route where staff is leading, I actually think that would actually probably save Jessica some time. I don't mean to insert myself in your schedule, Jessica, but the quantity of time that you probably spend both preparing and then educating the Community Services Subcommittee, I'm sure, is something that does take quite a bit of time. I would like to see perhaps a couple of public meetings, some open house type however staff decides is the best utilization of your time, energy, and efforts, but allow opportunities for both public comment, to have ideas captured, and to make sure that we are being as transparent as possible in the process.
So that's council to follow option D with suggestions to still provide some citizen input and the transparency. Do you have an opinion, Jessica, as to which one? D? Well, you did say option C, but between C and D, do you have a preference?
We had to ask Melanie.
And if you'd like to not answer that so that I could be further discussed with town leadership, that would be fine.
Mayor? One thing, and I don't know if we put it in this motion or we bring it to the next meeting, but the discussion we've just had, this is probably a short-term fix. And I think that at some point we need to bite the bullet and get a good and needs assessment. And so on a future agenda item, I think we need to put that on there, get some numbers, and let's do it right for the next year.
Councilmember Peterson?
I agree to put that on an agenda, and if we have other nods, let's do it. We were actually planning on taking it up as a subcommittee and bringing it forward for discussion. But
either way,
whatever's faster. I think we definitely need to look at that.
The mayor can put it on a future agenda like that.
Well, we need the whole council to see the needs assessment and proposals for the future, and that almost happened from Tuesday, and then we decided to hold off, but it'll come.
Okay, good.
Mayor, this is just one thought, and I want to make it clear for any who may be listening to me talk about social services for the first time. I'm not in favor of tax dollars going to these things, but for a while they'll continue to do so, and I do think it's important that I help that to happen in the most responsible way possible. And so to that end, I think priority 5, what we're looking for there, rather than it singling out a population like that, is socialization/education. I think if anything, if we're concerned about that area not being handled, I think that's really the term we want to put it under. And that would actually go to some of the things that Vice Mayor Sins talked about with the aged population.
We're called experienced people.
I'm trying to think of a good word here, but the aged population, because they certainly do have some of those programs as well. So that was just a thought, because it's really not consistent the way it's written.
Councilmember Cooper?
Going back to the options, and I think D, I agree that I think D might end up in kind of a default position where it's very similar to what we did this last year, and I'm actually comfortable with that personally. But the additional citizen input is important as things change, and so I'm still kind of leaning towards C. If it's the pleasure of the council to go with D, I could see that. I just wouldn't want it to turn into more sessions here at the dais for the council to be going through the details of this stuff. I really see some great value in having some citizens tear it apart and put it back together for us in a nice package, and so that's one thing I wouldn't want to lose, and that's kind of why I'm still leaning towards C.
Okay. And to the question I asked, I don't know if that would influence the council, and did you want to give any input on C versus D, or are you still back to comfortable doing either one?
Mayor, I'm comfortable doing
Okay.
either one.
So to the council, I think we're kind of split on C and D. I'm hearing that on the 5 priorities, needs assessment for the future will help, but for right now, I'm hearing that we can go forward with that. But on the C and D, I'm not sure. But I would entertain a motion, although I need to close the public hearing before I do that. But is it time for me to close the public hearing just in case a motion comes? Okay. I close the public hearing on agenda item number 29 and would entertain a motion or discussion that would help us come to a decision on C versus D.
Well, let me just share, and I don't like to bring up, we'll call dirty laundry, but I know that this last year process was painful because some members that were on the subcommittee, one member could change the outcome of the vote, and originally it did. And it was a painful process. And I know Jessica had to go through kind of a renegotiation with the members of that subcommittee, and there was a possibility of throwing out one of the votes out to kind of get it back to balance. So I know it was a painful process. And bless her heart for trying to manage 5 individuals that were very passionate about their opinion, but following the rules that were placed and not following, so it just made it a difficult process. So that's why I bring up option number D, because I know Jessica and her team is very passionate about this. We want it to go smoothly. I think, as Councilmember Daniels has said in the past, this should be something that we do for the needs of our community, and we should do it with a smile on our face, with a loving heart. I totally agree with that. And so that's why I lean toward having Jessica and her staff do this.
With that comment, I believe Councilmember Daniels has...
I just want to help us shortcut.
Yeah.
And I think maybe we ask it a different way instead of saying, do we want C or D? Does anyone have a problem with the way that the funding allocations came down last time, and do they expect to see something completely different than what we had last year? And I think what I've heard thus far is no. And so if that's the case, let's help expedite the process. Let's hand it back to our staff. Let's make sure that there's some type of opportunity, maybe multiple opportunities for public comment and public input. And let's try it a different way this year. And if we, after the needs assessment is done, want to go back to creating a citizen panel and allow them to, within the priorities, the new priorities, if there are new priorities under a new needs assessment to be met, let's.
Would you like to put that in a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
The only, Mayor, I think about 45 minutes ago when we started this conversation, Councilman Peterson brought up the idea of adding some language towards self-sufficiency, et cetera. I think we need to add that to the motion as well to make sure that that's included, if that's the desire of the council.
I think as part of my motion, then I will add that there be some additional language included, not necessarily the verbatim of what Councilmember Peterson stated, but the additional language be added, our staff add to the process and to the application that includes
My second includes that.
that type of assessment. Okay.
There's a motion and a second. Please vote. Thank you for working as a team to bring us to a 7-0 vote. I open the public hearing on agenda item number 30.
We have a comment card.
And we do have a comment card. Thank you. We'll begin with our staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Mike Melillo. I'm senior planner with the town's planning division. Item number 30 is the town's green building policy that we've submitted to you for your adoption. The green building policy stems from the general plan's implementation strategies. General plan was approved, as you recall, last year by the voters, and at the end of just about every chapter, there are a series of implementation strategies. One good way to think of those strategies is those help drive or help achieve the goals and policies contained in the general plan. So this green building policy really can be boiled down to 3 components. The first component would be to commit to implement green building strategies in town projects, specifically town projects over 5,000 square feet, as well as retrofits. Any of those new construction or retrofit projects would be meeting LEED Silver certification. LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. There would be a cross-departmental staff team that would be assigned to looking at the various features or components that would be incorporated into various facilities like fire stations, park facilities, et cetera. And it's the intent of the staff to have that group focus on those types of features that give us the greatest payback, because there may be some additional upfront costs with these projects, but you definitely, and we have seen that you get payback over time in energy savings, water savings, reduced solid waste, et cetera. Second component would be encouraging green building or sustainable building in the private sector. And we would do this through a sustainability checklist that we would introduce to the pre-app process. Totally voluntary process, but we'd basically note that projects, if they achieved a certain number of points, they would be recognized by the town council, recognized on the town's website for achieving some sustainable features in their projects. And there are private developers in Gilbert that are currently doing this. There's some residential developers that are incorporating these types of sustainable features into homes today. Third component would be an education component, basically educating our citizens and developers about the latest green building technologies. And so that is the third component of this. We see some of the major benefits, again, would be payback over time and reduced costs, reduce impact of the built environment on human health, healthier community workspaces, reduced pollution, cleaner environment, more robust economy. By having this policy and taking the leadership role, the town hopefully would be able to attract some more green industries. We already have a few, and hopefully we'd be able to attract more to the town. The town sets a great example, and again, it educates the public. Through our several-month process, we have taken this policy to the Environmental and Energy Conservation Advisory Board. We also took it to the Green Initiatives team. Both of those groups endorsed the policy, actually felt that we should set the bar a little higher at the LEED Gold standard. We also took it to the Planning Commission and to the Design Review Board. They offered comments on the policy and also supported the policy. Staff recommends that the council adopt the policy, and I'd be happy to answer any specific questions council members have on it.
Here.
Vice Mayor Sens?
Mike, thanks for putting this together, and I appreciate the hard work of taking it to all these various bodies. One of the discussions at one of the meetings, I don't know if it was environmental or the Planning Commission, but would you expand on the impact or the relationship between our building code and the national update that's coming and some of these things that you've put in this policy?
Yes, Mayor Lewis, Vice Mayor Sens. I believe that was the Planning Commission that may have mentioned that. And basically, we've already got the 2012 building codes that are under review by various town departments, and we expect that we will be adopting those codes in the coming year. Those codes contain many of the same types of standards and benchmarks that you're going to find in LEED Silver certification. But they are looking at individual components because they're building codes. And so they don't give you an entire comprehensive look at this, and they don't institute a LEED Silver certification, but they would bring us up to LEED Silver standards, just in individual components. So that again is one of the reasons why we settled on LEED Silver level, because it's consistent with those building codes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ray?
Follow up on that same question. So is it fair to say that if and when these new building codes are adopted, if a new building were to follow all of those codes, they would then become silver certified? Because although individually the codes may not make you silver certified, but combine them all together, would you then be silver certified?
Mayor, Councilmember Ray, that's a good question. I don't know that we've actually analyzed it to that detail, whether if you met all of these different plumbing codes, electrical codes, et cetera, that you'd meet LEED Silver. But all of them are bringing us in that direction of a LEED Silver certification. So they are consistent.
Mayor, can I follow up on that?
Yes.
Tell me a little bit more about these building codes. I don't want to get very far off topic at all. When do you expect these to be approved, and who is doing the review? Is this a citizen group at all, or is it just internal employees? How's this process going?
Mayor, Councilmember Ray, it's internal staff. There are numerous codes, and unfortunately, being a city planner, I am not well versed in building codes, but our inspection staff, our plan review and permitting staff, the folks that review commercial, residential buildings, they're the ones that are reviewing these codes for adoption. And based on recent conversations with them, I think it's very likely that we will adopt, if not all of them, certainly the majority of those codes.
Let's do Vice Mayor Sens and then Councilmember Daniels.
I was just going to answer Councilmember Ray, and what we learned with Station 10 and going through the LEED process, it's not just the building of the building, but it also, to get certification, it's something about the ongoing operations of the building and how it's operated. So I think Mike was right in that we're leading towards that, but you can't say we'll be certified just because we follow these until you get the operational aspect into it.
Yeah, I would also add that there are things that, with Fire Station number 10, that we just added to that project that are key components that aren't required by building codes, like the solar covered parking, the low water use landscaping. Those aren't required by code, but they will help actually that project reach LEED Gold certification.
Councilmember Daniels.
I have an on-the-spot question for Manager Banjer. What is the next town building that we expect to either build or retrofit besides this one?
Mayor, Councilmember Daniels, at this time, we have not identified what building that will be.
Does this policy bind us in a way that would require us to use certain materials and or technology that may or may not have a identified return on investment?
Yeah, and what Mike was describing to you in regards to the codes that would be put in place, and would that automatically qualify you for certification if you followed them? It's a very complex set of various categories where you can earn credits, and it really depends on the type of project in regards to what options you have and what various components or pieces of it that you'd like to follow in order to get the necessary credit. So it really is a case-by-case evaluation, but I can tell you that that is the overall overarching intent of LEED certified buildings, that they are more energy efficient, they are more environmentally friendly, they are more sustainable into the future. So yes, you should see by achieving LEED certification in whatever your project is, you should see a return on investment down the line.
Is this policy binding? Are we going to be required to build a silver certified building based on this policy?
It does have a clause that the town manager may grant an exception for town buildings on a case-by-case basis where deemed appropriate.
Okay. I can absolutely appreciate where this is coming from. I think I've recycled since I was like 4 or something. I understand and recognize the importance of taking care of the earth and our environment. So please don't mistake this as a statement against being green. But I hesitate to bind us to something that would, that may or may not have a long-term return on investment. We do not know yet, because so many of these technologies, they aren't just new, but they're just now being implemented in some of the building procedures that are being used. I hesitate to bind us to something like this without knowing what we really might be placing as far as a burden on our taxpayers. So I make that statement. If there's an education piece, I recognize that we have some goals in the general plan and that this helps us get there. I just don't want us to put the cart before the horse and make sure that we understand what we're really getting ourselves into by adopting a policy with this type of commitment.
Councilmember Cooper, then Councilmember Ray.
I had the opportunity to spend a lot of time on the general plan on this topic and visit with a lot of people about it. And as I look at this statement, it's entirely consistent with the conversation that we had. And that conversation was obviously to play a lead role, but we always said whenever it made sense, okay? We weren't going to just go willy-nilly and be the super green at all expense to the taxpayer. And so we wanted it to be feasible and to make sense. And as I've been looking at not only the staff report but the policy statement itself, I feel like it's not as binding as maybe you may feel as you look at it. But specifically in the first, it definitely sets direction. But in the first bullet, the very last line, you're going for silver or its equivalent, or to strive for higher levels of certification whenever project resources and conditions permit. I mean, you can read that a couple of ways, but I kind of read it as, as conditions permit, you go for silver or above. That's kind of one way to look at it. But really, the item 3 there with the town manager being able to grant exceptions, I think that gives us any opportunity that we need to. And just, I hear you on the binding and that side of thing, and if there's maybe some wordsmithing we can do to this, I just want you to know that in every meeting I sat in and discussed, this feels, when I was just reading this again here, I just thought, man, this is like they were listening. Staff, everyone was listening to what was said in those meetings and what the general plan and how it was approved. And so I'm real supportive of it. If we need to tweak it a little to make people feel a little more comfortable, I think we're trying to set a tone and a direction and ultimately save the taxpayers money, and that's kind of the goal.
Councilmember Ray.
I appreciate the comments by Councilmember Cooper and Councilmember Daniels, and I agree with most of them. I have a couple of concerns with this. Number one, I don't think that there is any real authority out there that can say what it costs extra to make a green or LEED certified building. If you go to the federal government's websites, they say between 2% and 6% extra cost, which is what it says in here. If you go to most websites outside the federal government, it says 10 to 15%. I know one of our planning commissioners, who I understand is either some sort of background with this, he made the same comment in the Planning Commission talking about how it was 10 to 15% and that it looked like the town was quite a ways off in what their upfront costs estimate would be. And so I have a major problem and concern with when we don't really know what the upfront costs are going to be and we're guessing percentages, and a difference of 8 to 10 to 12% is a tremendous difference in what we think the upfront costs are. I think it's a wise idea to, when appropriate and when the cost makes sense, to build and do things that are environmentally friendly. But I don't think it's a wise idea to create additional bureaucracy and additional government regulations in the name of trying to be more environmentally friendly and having a requirement of a silver LEED certification. I disagree a little bit with Councilman Cooper's comments. I read this to be much more stringent than when you feel like doing it sort of thing. I understand that, yes, the town manager has the ability to make an exception. I think that a proclamation, in my opinion, saying we need to try to be environmental friendly and we want to do what makes sense, that's a great idea. I think putting a requirement of a silver LEED certification is a bad idea. And at the least, I would think we would wait until these building codes are finished. It sounds like they will be approved, or at least some of them will be approved. But I have a hard time approving this and requiring this certification when the experts within each of the departments of the town still haven't approved these building codes. And so I would think at the least we should wait on this, but I think that it's creating more bureaucracy, intergovernmental group, an interdepartmental group who then decides how this works. I just don't think it's a good idea, and so I won't be supporting it.
Thank you. This might be a good time. We had one request from a citizen. Vice Mayor Sens?
Yeah, Paul Prosser. Paul, if you please state your name and municipality of residence when you start, and we'll give you 3 minutes.
Okay. My name is Paul Prosser. I'm a Gilbert resident. I'm an architect who has a business here in Gilbert. I am also part of the U.S. Green Building Council chapter here locally as one of the leadership people in that council. And I'm familiar with the LEED Silver certification that you've been discussing. I wanted to start out first by saying that I wanted to speak to some of your concerns first, I guess. One of the misnomers is that building codes and LEED certification do the same thing. They do not. The building code provides a baseline to start with. Certification under LEED raises that baseline to a higher level of energy conservation, water conservation, and it deals with waste that comes from buildings. Building codes never deal with waste that comes from buildings, except to say how it's transported. They don't tell you how much needs to be diverted to a landfill, diverted from the landfill. They don't tell you what you need to do with it once it leaves the site. None of that is part of it. So to conflate those two standards together is a mistake. You can't use them together. The second thing I wanted to address was Councilmember Ray's statement about the fact that the costs are the big thing. The costs are part of becoming a LEED Silver building. There are costs involved. I won't deny that there are costs involved, but a LEED Silver building, the costs are very minimal. And the benefits, aside from return on investment, hard costs in energy savings and water savings, are to the actual users of the building, the citizens of the town. Users of the buildings that are LEED certified have better job satisfaction, they have higher productivity rates, and they're happier in their jobs, and there's higher retention rates with people that work in those buildings. People that are out there looking for jobs now, especially young professionals, are looking for companies that are in LEED buildings. They're looking for all organizations that are in LEED buildings, and they want to be in those buildings. It's part of their job requirements now. They're interested in companies that are interested in sustainability, and they're also interested in municipalities that are interested in sustainability. So if you're looking to do economic development for the town of Gilbert, and you want the town to be competitive in the arena of green tech and clean tech and attract those businesses and those people that are interested in that, then you need to provide some leadership and show them that you're interested in being partners with them in that type of building. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have of me, but that's my statement on what we have here. I just want to say one more thing. When you think about environment and what we leave behind to our grandchildren and children, you have to think about environment. You have to think about clean air. And I know that this town is saying it's family friendly. You need to be family friendly in the environment as well. It's part of our legacy, and what we leave behind is important.
Thank you. Any comments on that, Councilmember Cooper?
Well, it's not necessarily on that. So if anyone has anything for Paul, then go ahead.
Councilmember Daniels?
I have one question for Paul. Paul, thank you for being here and for sharing your knowledge with us. You see Paul's mark all over Gilbert, so just so you know, keep looking because you'll see Paul's stamp in some of the work that he's done in some of the buildings that we have here in the town. Question for you on what LEED Silver means.
Okay.
Not educated on that at all. Have the standards, though, for LEED certification changed over the years, and do you expect those to continue to change? My question is directed specifically. Here we have in our policy language that says that we're requiring ourselves to be LEED certified, but let's say that 5 years from now, those qualifications to be LEED Silver certified change, the costs change, the requirements change, and we no longer feel like we can meet that. It would require a change in our policy rather than just accepting the fact we want to be environmentally friendly.
The standards, like the building codes, do change over time. The U.S. Green Building Council is interested in raising the threshold incrementally to make buildings more efficient over the years. When you go to certify a building, however, there's a standard. The current standard is what applies. Your building, once it's certified, does not have to then step up to the new standard once that new standard is in place. Just like if you have a building like this, which was built under building codes in the 90s, does not have to upgrade to meet the current building code. It's not a requirement. It's here, it's done. That's how, the same way that silver certification works. And just in a comment to your earlier comment, LEED Silver doesn't mean that you are locked into any specific type of building system. And in fact, LEED Silver uses many time-tested materials and systems, and you don't have to hardly use any new technology to meet a LEED Silver certification. It's really not that hard to do anymore. So that's just a comment on your earlier concern.
Thank you. Councilmember, anything else on that? Councilmember Cooper?
I think that last point is pretty good, that we're really not doing exactly what the voters asked us to do, which is to play a lead role. I mean, we're moving it incrementally, but silver is not platinum by any means. Yeah. But I think I heard Councilmember Ray say something about new regulations or something. I just don't see that, because it's really what we're trying to do for ourselves here as a community, where we may encourage others to do that, but how can we encourage others to do it if we're not doing it ourselves? And again, so we went through a general plan process. A lot of good work was put into that. Went to the voters, over 80% approved. Then a specific policy was put together. Went to our environmental board, which we all appointed, people that we thought knew what they were talking about and had some interest in that. Then it went to a planning commission, who we asked to check our work on things all the time. Then it comes to here, and all of a sudden, all that previous work doesn't make any sense. And that concerns me, that we would, why do we even ask for any input if we know better than them when it comes right down to it? And I understand we have a different role than they do, but at the same time, we got to listen once in a while. Otherwise, I think we'll stop getting the input. But really, I guess what I'm hearing is that ROI is a big part of it, and as I stated, it was a big part of it from the beginning. And so I don't have a problem putting something in this policy that says, if the ROI proves itself out, and we can wordsmith it as it needs to be done. But if that's also a condition, then I think maybe it addresses some of the concerns that you have, and it may even strengthen it to a point. But that would be my thought. But I mean, we can't go, turn our backs on the advice we've been given, go to Fire Station 10 and pat ourselves on the back for all the great work that we did, and then not move forward with things like this that really aren't even that big a deal. So
it's interesting, the timing this week. I joined Town Manager Banjer at the U.S. Green Building Consortium award ceremony, and we were able to see and hear and learn about buildings all over Arizona that are LEED certified, and it's contagious. And many other cities have policies like this, that they're are getting, as Paul said, other companies excited and workers excited. One of the things I believe I'm hearing is nothing against this policy, more the word binding, that we still want to have that option to make sure that it makes sense and that we can look at their ROI, the finances, and I wonder if some of these comments were not getting closer, if, and therefore I turn to leadership on the council, if there is a phrase or something, and Ben, you may, or Councilmember Cooper, you may have just proposed it, including something on ROI that would bring us closer, because I believe the concept is something the council supports. It is back to in representing the taxpayers and wanting to make sure that the money is used wisely, that we don't take that step to at least look at, as you said, the ROI to make sure this makes sense. And if it doesn't, back to the town manager, we would not bind ourselves. But is there something that we could still proceed and have language that would allow us to feel comfortable? Councilmember Cook.
Well, I actually want to go back a little bit here. What is the compelling reason why we need to have this type of proclamation if we don't even have a building on the near-term forecast? To me, it seems like, why don't we just wait to when we get to the point where we're going to build another building, because it may be 5 years from now. So I'm kind of wondering why we're even having this level of detailed discussion if we don't even have a building that we're thinking about doing.
From the event that I attended with our town manager, it's reputation. It's similar in economic development. What do you stand for? What are things that you're pursuing? And I think it's the example that's being set. Now, that doesn't mean I'm trying to lobby for it. I'm just, from that particular meeting we attended just 2 days ago, it was very evident that some communities have made this a strategic direction so that others can see it and be enticed to say, we want to be part of that. So that's part of an answer. Yeah. And Paul, you might even be able to answer more on that, but I realize you're just trying to help us. Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I appreciate everyone's thoughts on this. I share a lot of the same concerns that Councilmember Ray and Daniels have brought forward, and the issue of cost. And we could stipulate a return on investment period as a requirement for going, as a deciding factor in whether or not we go green or go LEED certified, LEED silver. But I got to tell you, I'm concerned about how well we're able to project our ROIs. I heard some comments there about the costs being minimal. And the reality is the costs are minimal to who? Are they minimal to an environmentalist, or are they minimal to a developer? Those are two different views. At the end of the day, my biggest concern is it minimal to the consumer? And I understand we're not getting there yet, but to me, this is just the first step along that road. We're hearing about these new codes. Let the consumer decide if it's minimal or not. We don't, with our business, we build homes very efficiently, and that's because the customers ask for it. Are we LEED certified in particular? No. But sometimes we are if someone asks for it, and we let them decide. So ultimately, let the person who's paying decide. Now, we're the ones paying in this case, so what do we do with this thing? I'm concerned about the return on investment. I don't know how to guarantee that we're going to be there, and especially with the raising the level issue changing over time, that's going to increase. There's already a plan. It's already planned to incrementally increase this. Well, at what point is it totally not pin out anymore? And we've committed to something that's become a burden, and we're gone.
Sure.
We're not here. So the policy's still in place, and it's created a precedent and a problem. I have a lot of concerns with this policy, especially the way it's written.
Let me, to Councilmember Peterson, Councilmember Daniels, and Councilmember Ray, listening, still the concept I'm hearing you're supportive of, you just have concerns. And so is there something that could be put into language that would cause you to feel comfortable? And I know, Councilmember Cooper, you were proposing some things, or are you just reaching a point where you're not comfortable? Councilmember Daniels.
I think we can make some changes, and I don't mean to reject any of the information that's been provided by our advisory boards. That's not my intention, but I don't sit on those boards either. And ultimately, we end up being the ones that vote on the appropriation to spend to build the new building that we haven't even determined where it's going to be or what it is yet. So I think that if we can perhaps in item number 1 or policy number 1, we say that the town of Gilbert will strive to meet the LEED Silver certification. But when you say we declare that all new occupied town buildings and facilities larger than 5,000 square feet in size will be designed, contracted, and built to achieve the LEED certification level or its equivalent. Is that it's equivalent to what it is right now? Which could that be bronze? Is there even a bronze?
No.
No.
They're certified with the lowest
silver,
category.
gold. I think we can make some changes to language that give the council and future councils a little flexibility. Yes, where possible, do not use paper towels, use hand dryers. I mean, all these different things that we certainly can do to encourage, good stewardship over our environment and over our earth. But
And
what are we committed to?
For the council, because I can see in the next few minutes we could get into the weeds and get into the details, to our town manager. You've heard some of these discussions. I'm about to propose that we give it back to our town leadership to try and make some wording changes and to bring it back to us. Do you feel like you have enough information to do that?
Mayor, members of the council, yes, and following some of the discussion that's being had, if you could give us maybe just a little bit more clarity, would something, if we develop some language around that the town will use best efforts to attain LEED certification at the silver level, if we can prove a return on investment that would justify any additional cost from doing so, would adding a process in this provide the type of direction that the council's looking for?
Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I spoke with Mike Melillo on this a little bit because frankly, I'm concerned with the whole policy, but knowing that I may not be able to be effective in just opposing it outright, I think to try and get it where it needs to be, we could be reasonable in expecting, according to Mike and his research, a return on investment within 3 years on LEED Silver. Okay? So that's typical. If that's typical, we should hold ourselves to at least that standard if we're going to be LEED certified. And that's a short enough amount of time that I think even if we do some misprojections, maybe we're okay. I'm still nervous about it, but
right.
That would be my suggestion.
I appreciate that approach because, as you said, if it's just you may not support this at all, but as you have seen the citizens, the general plan, various things, you're at least open to working to see if there's something that would make you feel comfortable. And that gets back to what Town Manager Banjer said. Does that language start to make you at least say, give it to town leadership and ask them to do a version 2?
Mayor, let me add one other comment. I'm just going to put this out there. In my preference, we take the word green and replace it with efficient and responsible. That's what I would do. And I say that because, Mayor, green means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And some levels of the meaning of green are plain outright anti-human. They really are. And I'm not saying we're talking about anything like that, but for some people, that's what it means. I'm not comfortable with that word either. I think we need to replace it with something we can all agree on, which I think efficient and responsible, or even sustainable. I prefer efficient and responsible, but even sustainable I think is an improvement.
Thank you. Any other comments for town leadership? Councilmember Cook.
Well, the one part I kind of struggle with is the actual term meaning the silver level. I think we should probably strive to the best that we can. It may come short of silver, but we still can proceed based upon the amount of money that we have available, the amount of the ROI that comes. I think that's really the goal, is to strive for the best efficiency with the dollars that we have. I'm not sure that I like to have that target specified as being silver, but that we do our very best to reach, the best goal that we can with the amount of monies that we have.
Mayor, I think you've successfully neutered this policy down to what we do today. So if that's what you want to do, that's fine. But I think it was heading in the right direction. The ROI comments, I think I think we've given enough direction there for something to come back that could reasonably pass and maybe push us in the right direction. And so I don't know if I agree with that, and I definitely don't agree with the taking green out, just because it is what it is. It's a term in the vernacular, and it's put out by the Green Building Council. I mean, we can't change everything. We had another resident that wants us to change everything to blue, because water is everything, and it's green. I'm sorry, we can't change it. I mean, but I know what you're saying, and those goals can be stated, and I think they are stated, and maybe they can be stated more importantly, but it's the jargon.
Any other questions? It's not entirely helpful, but part of my concern is this conversation continues, and we'll just continue to get into details and all the work that happened. And yet I think we've given some high-level statements. It is, we don't want to set a goal to be average, but we do have, and we've been consistent in Gilbert, to be one of the most cost-effective municipalities, and that's a good standard, and we can keep that. But at the same time, being a technology leader has some applicability to this. And what I just feel is we can be reasonable and still apply new technology and what makes sense for the future. But I'm not prepared, and I don't think it's a good use of our time to try and get into the details right now. But I do want to make sure you feel that you have enough information to give it a second version.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, I believe we have enough direction to go back and take a look at this. And in listening to everybody's thoughts on this matter, concerns, and the discussion, I think we can craft something that we can all get behind that does the right thing for the long-term sustainability and efficiency of our buildings, as well as make sure we keep an eye on the costs and long-term cost of ownership.
Thank you. And Paul, thank you for your leadership. He was there representing Gilbert at that U.S. Green Building Consortium, and we appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
Okay. I close the public hearing on agenda item 30, and I open the public hearing on agenda item 31.
Mayor, council members, Interim Director for Parks and Recreation, Melanie Dykstra. Tonight you are looking at a motion to look to separate the Human Relations, Culture and Arts Promotion Commission and create two separate bodies, one which would be the Human Relations Commission and the other would be the Arts, Culture and Tourism Board. We made a presentation during the council retreat explaining the current structure of the current commission, which is facilitated with one overall group meeting as well as two subcommittee meetings. And although the groups have worked really hard to be a cohesive unit, their interests are a bit divergent, and we have come forward with a recommendation to go ahead and separate this commission and let them work on their passions and interests as two separate bodies, which also will allow staff to just be assigned to two different meetings versus the three that we're currently conducting. In addition, in looking over the split and reviewing the powers and duties, it did become, they couldn't stand as they were because they didn't address both boards or commissions as presented. Therefore, the commission members themselves, we took the opportunity during their retreat to review the powers and duties as a group with, and so what you see before you is their recommendations for the language that would apply to each of their boards. It is at the discretion of council to give direction if these are suitable powers and duties or if you would like to make any amendments to those presented.
Thank you. Let me start with Councilmember Cook. In your role as the liaison, thank you for your leadership. Is there any feedback you want to give to the council in giving us some leadership?
I'm in full support of the splitting the committee into those two. But I think what's really something important that I want to share is about business processes and giving direction. Because the committee, as you may remember, did put together a wonderful planning, strategic planning type of a documentation There have been multiple times where the committee has asked me, what is the direction of the council? What did they think about what we proposed? And to be honest, I think we have failed this committee for really giving them direction. So that was one of the reasons why I feel strongly if we split this into two, we now have some easier focus to apply, to give these wonderful individuals that have a sincere passion for this. So to me, if we go down this road where we, split the group into two separate entities, I think we need to have a commitment from this council, a vision and direction that we will give to these folks. Because if we don't provide that, because they're really an extension of our council, I think it's important that we, from a business process, practice here, as well as a process, that we are committed to these two new groups, but we give them some direction. We talk about, for this coming fiscal year, these are the things that, you've given us some ideas, and we feel you should go down this path. But I think we need to have a commitment from this council to give that direction to them.
Thank you. Councilmember Ray?
Would that be something, Councilman Cook or Mayor Lewis, that that a subcommittee would be in charge of, or what would your thoughts be on how that would happen?
Again, back to the document that they gave us, we really didn't, as a council, kind of digest it, kind of, go through a discernment process of that, because there's a number of ideas that are in that document that we haven't really given them any true feedback as to which direction, that committee should go. So there needs to be some process of this council that takes this level of input. We, again, go through a discernment process, and then at that point, we give them direction based upon the recommendations.
Thank you. Councilmember Peterson?
Mayor, I totally agree with Councilmember Cook on this. I think they desperately need some feedback from us, and direction and vision is also important. They work for the council, so we need to let them know what it is we want them to do. I think that direction should start right at the level of this founding ordinance. I believe that there are things here that we should review as a council, and there's some good language in here, and I really appreciate all the work that's gone into it. But I think that there are some opportunities for clarity and maybe even improvement on this. I think it would be a great idea to create a subcommittee to go through this, really digest it, make sure that at least as a subcommittee we feel like it represents our vision, and then we can recommend that to the council, and then the council can adopt it as a part of their vision. And we start at the ground level, giving good, clear direction right with the establishment of these boards and commissions. So that's my thought.
Melanie, the timing, as we talked in the study session on Tuesday, seems like about February 1st, something like that, and not specific, but we ask for a general estimate as to how quickly we wanted to proceed. And wasn't that what we said on Tuesday?
Mayor, council members, yes, we had this ordinance effective as of February 1st because my understanding from the clerk's office is it takes about 90 days to do the recruitment in order to get the commissions fully with their membership at full based on the split. I don't know in terms of, and this might be a question for Susan, is whether or not you can officially allow them to split tonight so that we can move forward with to begin the recruitment as you work on the powers and duties and direction. That I would refer to Susan.
I'm not 100% I understand the question. You mean create the two subcommittees before you have the recruit, but they're wanting to put it off.
Although, Melanie, the current HR cap would stay in place till a certain date, let's say it's February 1st anyway, right?
Yes, they would, Mayor, council members, they would function together as one group as we do the recruitment and selection in order to make two full split commissions with full membership. I just don't know if you can start.
I got it. You're asking if we can start the recruitment before we actually get the ordinance. Yes, you can.
Okay, that's helpful. And if we did have a subcommittee, and I'll turn to the council in just a moment, I'm not sure if I would recommend we formalize it, that we would just, let's pick 3, and between now and our next council meeting, if possible, try and have a meeting or 2 to see if we can't move forward so that it's done expeditiously. Councilmember Daniels?
I don't mean to delay the decision here, but I have a different suggestion about how we might be able to go about this. One, we vote on everything that we have in front of us tonight, we move forward. But I don't think this is an isolated incident where we need to provide direction to our boards and commissions. I think it's probably necessary in the majority of the ones that we have a town relationship with. And so I would ask that as a subcommittee, and it would probably need to be a formal subcommittee after we voted on this type of the ordinance that's in front of us tonight to split the 2 groups, that we provide direction, tasks, and assignments for each board and commission, and then present the council's philosophy where necessary. And I'm thinking specifically through our planning commission and our design review board. They're often in a position to not just interpret code, but also council philosophy, and I think it would be helpful for them, and I've heard from many of them that they would like additional direction from us as a council. We've tried to do it in a joint meeting, but it almost seems like there isn't a free flow of information, and so perhaps if we had something more concrete to present to our boards and commissions. Again, the Parks Board has a specific assignment right now, and that's through Parks Master Plan and Sports Coalition and some different things, so they may not need that type of specific thing. Am I off agenda? Is that why you're about to go?
Yes, you are.
So I have a future agenda item. It's already been signed. We can talk about it later. But I actually think we should move forward with the information as it's been proposed to us tonight.
A summary of that, which is, I do think still applicable to this topic, is you're saying formalize subcommittees and probably have 2. One for the arts and one for the HR. And the 2 groups then would come back with a formal statement and direction for the 2 committees, which is what they're asking for. And we could proceed with the organization and moving forward. That sounds reasonable. Councilmember Peterson?
I would just want to make sure I understand Councilmember Daniels' suggestion. So I understand what you're suggesting. Would these subcommittees be reviewing to the level of the founding ordinance, or are you just talking about ongoing direction?
We'll speak specifically about the HR CAP board because that's the one I'm allowed to talk about right now. That for the next fiscal year or for the next year of its existence, perhaps it's a 2-year type vision and mission, that we would want them, it would not touch the ordinance. It would be specific assignments and tasks that we would like our boards and commissions to accomplish over the next year or 2 years, however the subcommittee decides.
And back to helping our town leadership, if we proceed with this direction, which is guidance to say we want to proceed and keeping things organized, but we would not do a formal vote, but we could consider 2 subcommittees that would give more direction for a formal vote at a later date.
I think that's fine.
Okay. Is it appropriate, because we can organize subcommittees outside of this meeting, but is it appropriate, because we're looking to the future, to see if there are some individuals that have a preference?
Sure, that's fine.
If I ask if some of you wanted to serve on a subcommittee for the HR versus a subcommittee on the arts, do any of you have some preferences? HR? Arts? HR?
You know, Mayor Lewis, I think I might have misunderstood a little bit. If you want to have volunteers for the subcommittee, that's fine, and you can appoint them, but it really isn't on this agenda.
Right. So, yeah. And that's why I was wondering, and I'm looking for some quick guidance to talk future. And if it's not appropriate to do it now, that's fine. But I did just get 3 names, so I'm off and running.
You know, I think you can go ahead and take those names.
So no
and
decisions
appoint the
made, but just quick
subcommittees
feedback, and if there are any others. Any other feedback? Good. Thank you. I have some feedback. I can now work with town leadership to move forward on that, so thank you. So on this agenda item 31, do you have some information that you need tonight, Melanie, to move forward?
Mayor, council members, I do want to just clarify that my understanding is we can move forward in the recruitment of membership for the intention of splitting the boards, and then we will come back when we have that completed with the ordinance as well as the membership, correct?
Yes, and we can do that without doing a formal vote.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, I'm good.
So I close the public hearing on agenda item 31. On administrative items, we have done 32, 33, 34 is the next one we go to. Vice Mayor Sens.
Thank you, Mayor. On October 2nd, I guess before that, anyway, on September 20th, we interviewed and made a decision on our Planning Commission, and we appointed Josh Eiler as a regular member, along with Jeffrey Guyette, and then Chris Seipel as our alternate. Subsequent to that, Mr. Guyette sent us an email, and his employer would not allow him to take the assignment. So we've got some options and listed below. And what I would like to propose, it's a little different. It's not one that's listed, but I would like to move that we appoint Chris Seipel to the unexpired term ending June 1st, 2015, and without going back through a re-rank order or re-interviews. And for the following reasons, I'd like to recommend that we appoint Brian Farrow as the alternate. Brian has a background in landscaping and also represents the southern part of Gilbert. And I'd be willing to give up his Parks and Rec assignment immediately.
Councilmember Cook.
So I guess I want to ask a question. It sounds like we have 5 options here, A, B, C, D, and E. Is that correct?
Yeah, I picked D at council discretion.
So, because what I'm thinking is I would like to go, to me, do option B, which is to interview the next 2 highest candidates, Keith and, is it Kyle? I mean, that's what I would like to do.
Well, we've already interviewed Keith. Mayor.
Yeah.
Councilmember Ray would like to.
Please.
I agree with Councilman Cook for 2 reasons. One, and if we don't need to interview Keith again, that's fine, but I think that we should interview the person who scored the next highest for 2 reasons. One, they scored the next highest. And number 2, I'm biased towards Brian Farrow because he's on the Parks and Rec board, and he's doing a great job there.
You don't want to lose him?
That's one way to say it, Mayor.
Okay.
Well, I go to Councilmember Cook, and he's always asking the question, and well, wait a minute, I'm not allowed to say a whole lot, but he likes the question, so what skills do we not have on this commission or this board? And Brian fills 2 skill, or not, a skill and a representation that we do not currently have on planning, and that's South Gilbert. Councilmember Daniels.
Okay. Please.
Well, if that's the statement to be made, then we need to open up the applications only to those individuals who have landscaping background and who live in South Gilbert, and we need to allow it to be a public process where there's the contribution from anyone who wants to be included in it. I mean, if that's the criteria, then we need to make sure that that's being stated as we're making the selections. It doesn't help us in the process to pull someone from one commission and put them on another when we're going to have to go re-interview anyway now for the Parks Board. And so I don't think that solves another issue that we're trying to address here, which is to not have to go through an entire interview process for a position. So I am not in favor of the suggestion that was made by Councilmember Sentz, but I am in favor of us interviewing either the next highest ranking individuals or opening it back up and starting over with the other, for the alternate position. Obviously, we would move Mr. Sipple to the.
Mayor, what I'd like to do then, let's split it up. And I will make a motion to move Chris Sipple from the alternate to the position ending June 1st, 2015.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Please vote. That's approved. And then the second part. Of taking the next step.
Mayor, I'm in favor of option B as well. I just think that fits our normal process the best. It's consistent and as fair as possible.
Well, to go to Councilmember Daniels' position, though, Keith is already on another board. So if we're going to follow our new policy, what do we do? Do we make him resign, or if we pick him, or we're going to be right back in the same boat?
Well, I have heard at least 2 council members favoring B, and I think for Keith it would be stated up front, and it was when he interviewed before, that if he were selected for this, he would need to resign his other one.
And then we got to fill another board.
Right.
Councilmember Daniels said we don't want to do it.
So does that impact our B decision?
No.
I forget which one he's on.
Industrial Development Authority, I believe.
I like B.
So good point. Does that cause us to change your position on Bs? It does not, and it does not. So if someone would like to make a motion related to B.
I move to approve option B.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please vote. Okay, option B it is. Thank you for the feedback and giving us some leadership to try and get us going, but it sounds like...
Well, whatever they want to do.
Okay. What we want to do right now is go to agenda item 35. Reports from other boards, commissions, and committees to the council. Councilmember Cooper.
Just a note for those that may not see this on their calendars, the Redevelopment Commission is having a special meeting. They've already met once this month. They're having a special meeting on Monday at 6:30 at the Heritage Annex or the Gilbert Chamber building. So if you didn't see that come across your calendars, and to the public that's interested in the Heritage District, that special meeting will happen on Monday at 6:30. Thanks.
And it's 6:30 a.m.
p.m.
p.m. p.m. Location?
Heritage Annex or the Gilbert Chamber, the large room.
All right. You may have said that, but I was back to whether it was 6:30 a.m. or, but thank you. All right, thank you. Other comments?
Mayor.
Councilmember Ray?
I also want to just say thank you to the Parks and Rec Master Plan Steering and Technical Committees who met this last week as they continue marching forward with the Parks and Rec Master Plan. They have made great progress. There's a long ways to go, and it's a tremendous group who works diligently to continue making that plan happen. And again, invite the public to be a part of it. These are all public meetings that are posted, and welcome to give input and be a part of it. But appreciate their willingness to sit through some very long and not most exciting meetings I've ever been to, but they do a great job.
Thank you. Any other comments? Agenda item 36, future meetings. Any discussion there? Agenda item 37, report from town manager.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I want to recognize some employees of the town of Gilbert. On Wednesday, October 24th, executives from the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation came to Gilbert to award 3 Gilbert firefighters with a trophy for winning Best Overall Team in the Arizona Stair Climb and Firefighter Challenge. They set a new record of 1 minute 42 seconds and have been the winners of this award for 3 years running. The member of this year's team are firefighters Chuck Harris, Greg Katzis, and Roy Lewis. So congratulations to them.
Great. Congratulations to that team. Thank you. Agenda item 38, report from council members on current events. Councilmember Peterson.
You already mentioned it, our fall festival, but just thought I'd put a shout out for that this coming weekend. So details on our website.
Thank you. Saturday, noon to 9 p.m. And report from mayor on current events. I wish to thank our town manager. What a good sport. And it was announced at the Mayor's Breakfast for the Arts this morning that Town Manager Banjer would be singing at the Art Walk a week from Saturday. That's downtown Gilbert at 11 a.m. Something to do with some baseball team that he favored versus some baseball team the mayor favored. That National League Championship went to this one team that is now ahead 2-0 for the World Series. But I'm not getting to that part. The part is a current event, which will be a week from Saturday. The entire community is invited to come and hear Town Manager Banjer sing his solo. It will be one of the finest community events we've ever had.
Mayor, Town Attorney Susan Goodwin said you're off agenda. And,
Mayor, I'd be glad to accompany him musically to help, his skills in singing here.
This is a team effort all around, so we appreciate it.
You'd have to play real loud.
But the point is, we have a great town manager that helps the community grow. In this case, I hope it doesn't cause people to not shop Gilbert if they, no, he'll get some good training. There, not only has Councilmember Cook offered to be backup, we even had someone offer to give some voice lessons between now and then. But that's a different current event. And for the sake of our October 25th meeting, thank you for being here. For various members who did need to help quickly with the sound, and meeting adjourned. Bumgarner wasn't a two-hitter.
Oh, no. How about that?